It felt, what I saw standing in front of me was a broken individual that was hiding from circumstances that he had no control over, and he had built a mask that he was putting on in front of the world, that was hiding the sorrow, the regret, right? All these feelings of, of a death that he had no control over, right? And he just manifested this world around him that was just destroying his life. And I saw that in front of me, right? And I destroyed it.
All right, this week on the 38 Challenge podcast, we have Tim Jensen from Grunt. Tim, how we doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. This is a fantastic little joint that you have here, my friend.
Dude, I cannot take credit for it. Shout out to Ibble. Ibble is doing some fantastic stuff in the podcast social media realm, which will.
Yeah, I'm hearing notes of my own voice that I've never heard before.
You are like Seth Rogen, but way scarier.
Oh, you're flattering.
and more better looking for sure. But only second time in Austin.
Yeah, second time in Austin. It's I'm a slower kind of guy. I left the city of Chicago because I don't like that fast life anymore, and San Antonio's kind of slow.
Yeah, no, yeah, we had it. Yeah, absolutely. So we were introduced at a Warrior Rising event where you all hosted the business shower, which was awesome. Shout out to Warrior Rising and Jason Van Camp, all those people as well.
Yeah, but great organization.
Absolutely, yeah, and we got to talking about some awesome work that we can do with the Grunt Style Foundation, and just your story and your willingness to be a man and to be vulnerable and to be a warrior and to be vulnerable. So I appreciate you jumping on the pod today, brother.
Yeah. I mean, it's an important subject, right? We've just come out of the longest war in American history. We've had a lot of the treasure of this country go off to fight combat and see some extraordinary things that they had never anticipated seeing. Maybe some did anticipate it, but whatever. But there's a lot of things that a lot of luggage that comes with that war, right? That that needs to be kind of sorted out, and that's where I think we can all be a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So why don't you talk about your experience in the military?
Yeah. So I started out in my career as it wasn't really a career. I did one enlistment in active duty. Then I got back into the reserves. But it started in 1997. I joined the Marine Corps in Raleigh, North Carolina, against my mother's wishes. She grew up in the Vietnam period, and story I tell is when I told her I wanted to join the Marine Corps, she's like, "Is that really what you want to do?" And I'm like, "Yes, Mom, that's what I want to do." She's like, "Oh, blah, blah." We're going back and forth. But she ends up taking me up to Washington, D.C. on Memorial Day, and we go to the Vietnam Wall, and and it was the first time I saw my mother cry in a way that I did not force upon her, right? Like I did. It wasn't because of me. And so that was a very touching moment for me, and one that I will always remember. And and it was at that point for me that I was like, yeah, okay, I think I made the right decision. Military service being, and I was really enamored by the Marine Corps. I grew up in the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. I was born in 1978. I grew up in the period of the Stallones, the Schwarzeneggers, the action hero, right? That that really romanticized the Vietnam era, mm-hmm. right? So that was really impression on me, and really bled into my teenage years, and and if it wasn't for joining the Marine Corps, I'll tell you, I would have been probably locked up in prison. I was a bad kid. Mm-hmm. I'm not very proud of those years, and so I joined the Marine Corps, and was an 1833 Amtracker. I did that, and I was if you can imagine, I was a terrible garrison Marine. But I liked going out and doing the stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't like sitting in the rear, busting rust and changing, road wheels and doing all this stupid stuff. But it was all necessary. I was young and stupid at the time, so I didn't really understand all that. So that goes through. I did 4 years there in Camp Lejeune, shared between Lejeune and Pendleton. And then after that, went back to Chicago. Got a union job doing some carpentry there. And I was on the job when September 11th happened. And, it was, man, like, it was only a couple of months. I got out and back to Chicago in April 2001. So I'm thinking to myself as all that's happening, I'm like, my goodness, like I'm no longer in the Marine Corps, right? And we're going to war, so I had this pent up rage was starting to boil inside me, right? And then it became to a fervor, and where I started pursuing getting back in the Marine Corps, and I found myself back in the Reserve Battalion in Chicago. It was 2nd Battalion, 24th Marines, weapons company there, and I got into the I&I station first. Found out that they were deploying, and asked to get in transferred to that unit. And they're like, well, we can't do that because you're not an 03. It's not in the MTO, and they need these specific ruck for this ruck. That's an identifier for the Marine Corps in their unit. So I was like, well, I'll OJ, man. I'll OJT. I'll do on the job stuff. And so I worked all that out, and they put me into the unit and did a deployment with them to Iraq in 2004, 2005 to the Triangle of Death, and that was a lot of fun. It was certainly a period in my life that you want to talk about vulnerability, right? One I don't. There's not enough training in the world for combat, right? Because once you can run the same plays over and over and over and over and over again, or it's the same battle drills. But once that first shot happens, right, it's all out the window, and you're just reacting and you're regressing to the mean. And man, that was some terrifying stuff, right? Watching your friends die, and hoping that it's not you the next day or the next moment. That was an incredible time period. And hats off to all those guys and gals that did 7, 10, 15 deployments, right? Like, my goodness, you guys are the rock stars. I only did one, and I think that was enough for me.
Yeah.
So I got out after my time doing that in 2005. I came back from that deployment, got out, and kind of fluttered around, not doing really much of anything. I went back to the union job, and that was really just adding more to a bad situation that I was finding myself in. Right, adjusting. Because it was like a ripcord. Like, you come back from Iraq, and in the reserves we disband, and like, oh man, I'm a dad.
Right. Yeah.
Because my son was born when I deployed, and I come back home like, holy shit, man, I'm a father. I don't know anything about children. And my wife's like, yeah, welcome to the party. I'm like, oh my god. So that was a terrifying. That was probably more terrifying than actually being shot at. Man,
I'm
to
sure.
tell you the truth, right? Because now you're responsible for your men and your Marines, right? When you're in combat, but now I'm like that. I got this human life that is mine. I made it, right? And like I'm holding that in my hands, and I just did 12 months of learning how to destroy life.
Right. Yeah. Now you got to take care of it.
Right? Could you imagine the irony, right? So it was tough, man, and my life kind of really spun out of control after that, and it was a long dark period of time there, and there's some suicidal ideations that came along with that, and I'm just thankful that I had a really strong network that we didn't get to the point where I became another number.
Right, man. So we'll dive a little deeper into that, right, and what that all looked like. Before we do so, how would you define? You alluded to it earlier. How would you define vulnerability? What it means to be vulnerable?
I think it's just being honest with yourself. Right, we do this incredible thing in life, and we create this ego, right? Then this ego creates defenses to, really protect you from all the negative shit that happens in the world that we live in, right? And those are natural defenses that your body will just naturally start building a resistance to, and and that's okay. Right, but we need to be cognizant of that. Right, we can't go in our entire lives building walls and closing ourselves off to where we're not feeling the world that we're living in. Right, if we cannot feel the world that we're living in, we're not living. We're existing. And I think the point of vulnerability, or the idea of being vulnerable, is to really drop those manifestations, clear out your ego, and experience the world in which you're living, good, bad, or indifferent.
Absolutely, yeah. And that ego has not been talked about yet. with vulnerability. I think that's such an important part. So for my brother, for example, had a huge ego. I think that is the culture of the Marine Corps, right? Just a bunch of badass dudes, right? Who are too tough to have anything wrong with them. And that's how I saw my brother, right? And a lot of it had to do with pride, with ego, right? And ego only gets in the way of the things that are good in this life.
Yeah.
So I love that you mentioned that part of ego. So what did ego look like in your life, and how did you get rid of it? Or make less of it, I guess. I guess we all have a little bit of ego.
Yeah. I mean, ego's good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it is, right? It builds confidence, it builds character, conviction, right? Those are all the positive things.
Right.
I think, for me, how it was a matter of like self-realization, self-actualization, right? I've always been really excited by the ideas of industrial psychology and how people and behaviors and how people create behaviors in their own lives. That's been something that's really interested me. So for me, it's I've always been a little bit more further down the road, I guess you can say, than most people on how I perceive myself. But it was only recently, within the last year, I'd say, that I really started putting a lot of attention into what ego dissolution really is, right? And I think that's important for people to understand, is that the perceptions that you have for yourself versus how other people perceive you are two different things, right? And if you cannot understand that, and put some energy into reducing what you personally think about yourself. And what I mean by that is, not self-immolating, right? But more of like saying, hey, like, that I probably could have had a warmer relationship or a better conversation with this person, right? I could have been more present in this conversation. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the ego of and these behaviors and that has created all that. So. I really started paying more attention to that, and it's coincidentally when the fall of Afghanistan started happening. Which, crazy enough for me, I was never in Afghanistan. I don't know anything about it. My brothers were. I've heard it from my brothers.
Right.
I've heard it from other Marines that I've served with and what happened there. But when that whole circumstance happened, it started bringing repressed memories from my time in Iraq to the surface, and that was troubling for me because I was really experiencing these things like, man, what the hell's going on? Like, I don't remember that happening to me. Am I starting to blend other people's stories into my own belief, right? And that's common, right? So I go and I start reading my journal, because I kept very good notes of my time in Iraq, and sure shit, like I was having some very repressed memories coming to the surface of some very traumatic periods that was clearly in my book, right, or in my journal.
Is that common for people to journal when they're?
I think of probably my period, right? Because when I grew up, journaling it was still like a thing in school, like they taught that, right? I don't necessarily. I can't speak for the generations behind me. I don't know if that's something that did, but I know all the age group of the Marines I was with, we all kept journals.
That's awesome. I mean, that's well, I guess to go back and realize that you had those experiences.
Yeah.
What was that? Was that I'm assuming led to some of the thoughts that the spiral?
Yeah. So going back and reading all that, I was like, wow, like, man, this is heavy stuff, right? And I connected with a friend, and I'm talking about my friend with it, and I fly out to Phoenix to visit him, and my wife's like, hey, you should probably get away and kind of clear your thoughts and this, that, and the other. And I have 3 kids, and it was a big thing for my wife to say, you should probably go out, right? Hang out with your buddies. So I go do that, and he introduced me to psilocybin, right? And of all things, we go. He picks me up from the airport, puts 2 pills in my hands, like, here, take this. I'm like, I don't know, man. And he's like, you trust me?
Right off the plane?
Yeah, right off the plane. He's like, do you trust me? I'm like, yeah, I trust you. And he's like, take the 2. So I take one, and then I take another one a little bit after that, right? And we go to see, watch his daughter's school has a play, the new Addams Family play. This was last year, right around Halloween. And it was fantastic, right? I sat the entire time processing my own emotions. I'm in my own head, right? And I have no idea what I'm watching.
Yeah.
I'm not even there, right? I'm in myself. And I'm processing all this stuff. And I swear to you, like the next morning, I felt like I lifted the world off my shoulders to some degree.
So did you know when you were going to Arizona that you were going to take psilocybin? No, you didn't.
No, I was going there to something unrelated. Right?
Wow.
And but that really opened up the doors of something completely different, where I ended up going to do some plant therapy, specifically ayahuasca, and that's where I truly met my ego face to face. Was on this journey.
How long ago was this?
It'll be a year in November.
Okay, I was gonna say you said it was recently.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was able to stand right in front of my ego, and I didn't like what I saw. Like I wanted to destroy the image of Tim Jensen that was standing in front of me, right? And that was a huge moment in my life, right? There's a couple moments that we all as humans can think back in our lives are very pivotal turning points of our lives, right?
Absolutely.
And that was one of them for me, was when I destroyed myself into 1,000 pieces and it shattered in front of me, and then every ounce of me collapsed to the floor. I think that was a death moment for me, and I killed something of me. I killed a part of me that I think needed to go away.
So when you looked in the mirror and you were confronted with your ego, what parts of it didn't you like?
It felt, what I saw standing in front of me was a broken individual that was hiding from circumstances that he had no control over, and he had built a mask that he was putting on in front of the world, that was hiding the sorrow, the regret, right? All these feelings of a death that he had no control over, right? And he just manifested this world around him that was just destroying his life, and I saw that in front of me, right? And I destroyed it. And when I came out of it, and what I've been living the last year is the best Tim Jensen that has existed on this planet.
That's nuts. Let's put that on pause. I want to get back to that because I want to hear what you think led up to what made up that ego and the old Tim Jensen. Because I know, as we discussed, you had these moments of your life where you were suicidal, and you had this beautiful child, and you came back, and I'm sure you felt lost.
Yeah.
So walk me through kind of what that path looked like. That path of seemed like a dark time.
It really was. I had I go back there. I did this video called or a documentary called The Bullet. It's on Amazon Prime, and it really speaks about that whole period in time. And the Cliff Notes version of it is, I was really struggling with survivor's guilt. I felt that the death of my driver, my very dear friend, Corporal Nathan Hammond, was my fault, my responsibility. I did not do the job of a sergeant of Marines, right? So I had all of that stuff that the Marine Corps put on top of me and said, "This is what you do as a sergeant of Marines," right? And I had, so that was a burden, right? Or maybe that burden's not even the right word. Maybe that's the onus that they put on you, right? So I was never able to reconcile that, and there was a lot of and now I look back at it, and I use this word trauma now in my vernacular, my lexicon, right? Yeah. And as I think back on that, and there was a lot, like putting your friend into a bag in several pieces, right? And it's not even recognizable as a human anymore. That has, I don't give a shit who you are, right? You could be the baddest SEAL on the planet, or you could be the best supply private in the Army, right? It's going to have an effect on an individual, right? Especially when you're just having, a conversation with that person not even 5 minutes before about something completely unrelated, and the next thing you know, he's dead from combat, right? But that's the work that we chose, so all of that was really working on me, and there were several other. I mean, we had a tough deployment. It was a really tough deployment. Yeah. And when I got back from that, and you're ejected out from the Marine Corps into space, and I'm trying to figure out how to be a father, how to be a husband again, how to insert myself into the family unit and be a value add to a household that's already been running without me for the last year, right? That was extraordinarily difficult. I felt inadequate. I felt like, again, I was, last 12 months of my life has been learning and involved in destroying life. I'm like trying to just turn that off and be this nurturer was, to a 1-year-old son. Wow, that was incredibly difficult, and I didn't feel like I was up to the job. So I had a lot of insecurities that were really compounding on me during that time period, and it led down to some really poor decisions: alcohol, drugs, infidelity. My wife left me. I lost my house, lost my children. I lost all these things, right? And really was making some bad decisions. Like I look back at it, I'm like, man, like how did you get there, right? But you when you're there, you're in, and you don't have people that are like pulling you out of it. That hole can go rather deep.
So do you think those decisions were caused by the depression that you were in and the things that those insecurities that you were referring to?
Yeah. I think a lot of that had to do with the insecurities, my headspace at the time. I think it had to do with the cocktail of medication that the VA had me on. I think it was all just compounding to it was a pressure. Like there was a moment in time, my friend, that I'm driving home from work, and I ended up in Portage, Indiana. All right, my normal route is about an hour from the city to my home. I ended up 99 miles away from my house. I don't know how I got there. Right, wow. Nothing triggers. Like it was like, excuse me, I'm at work, then I'm in Portage, Indiana, on the side of a highway, not knowing how the fuck I got there. That was a problem, right? That's when I stopped taking all the medicine. So then there's all this other stuff. I took a job being a bouncer, right? Because I couldn't sleep at night, and I had all this rage, and I'm thinking to myself, what is a job that I can do that work at night, and I can rage out on people? Well, I'll be a bouncer. So I went and found this Coke bar that was in the town I was in. It was a notoriously known motorcycle headquarters for a biker gang in the southern Chicagoland region, and well, not really a headquarters, but a hangout. And the owner's like, "Hey man, I got a Coke problem." I was like, "Hey man, here's my credentials. Like, how can I help you?" And
I want a problem. Yeah.
Right? So I was able to do a little bit of that and get some of that rage out and do it for good. But it was still a weird time. It was a weird time, right? And then I met my wife, my current wife now, and I'm very thankful that she's really centered me on all the things that I think are important, right? And brought me back from a very dark period of my time in my life. To where I was just secluding and looking inward and pushing the world away from me and building those walls, letting my ego get the best of me, and there you go. Right?
Yeah, it sounds like there was a period where you were a bouncer, right, doing blow, in a period between then and when you met your wife and when you did ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So what did that period look like, and how did vulnerability play a piece into? Did you ask your wife for help, or did you ask someone else for help, or how did you, I guess, pull yourself out of that darkness?
I think it was, I really started reading a lot of, going back to the basics, right? I had an alcohol problem earlier in my life, and I had gone through some AA, right? So I started revisiting some of the Serenity Prayer, and understanding that there are things that happen in your life that are beyond your ability to control, right? And you have to be at peace with that. So I tried to I started really finding ways to become at peace with myself. That was extraordinarily difficult, right? Because I tried counseling, I tried talking to private doctors, and what I found was everybody wanted to hear the story of combat.
Right.
They wanted to hear about combat, right? And I'm like, well, that's not really. I don't really want to talk about that, right? But and I know that there was an issue that needed to be talked about, but the way that I went through like 3 or 4 different doctors, right? And the way that it always came up was like they they would get on the edge of their seat as I'm talking about some of the things that I experienced in combat. And I was like, man, this is not helping me at all.
Yeah.
Right.
They felt excited by
exactly.
Yeah, your trauma.
So that was difficult to experience, but so you're trying to different ways. I got into yoga, right? Got into men's bowling, all these different stupid.
I love it though, man. I love it.
But but I was searching, right?
Right, and that's the important. Yeah. That's what vulnerability is. It's like you said, being honest and searching.
Yeah.
And the fact that you were trying all these different things, like sometimes therapy is going to help for some people, and some conversations will. Other times it won't. But it's like it's the thought. And it's the will to keep going, right, and trying until you find something. Because I'll let you answer that, but it sounds like something worked for you.
Yeah. So, all those years in between, right, and my drinking, became. It wasn't as bad as like 2005 to 2010, right? That was the really bad years. But I would say, then I went to college, got my college degree, graduated cum laude. So I'm there, right? I'm functional.
Absolutely.
Right? I graduated top of my class with game theory and design, right? So that's not a dumb man's, degree. It's not like I was going to get like my my art degree.
Yeah,
right? But not disparaging anybody. I'm just kidding. But so I was fully capable, right? Is what I'm saying. But it was always my shortcomings. It was the shortcomings that I was laying on myself that was, putting me in these terrible positions where I was making these bad decisions, right? So I was not doing myself any favors, So I started really looking at that, and I started cutting out all the garbage in my life, all the toxicity in my life, and what I started noticing then was my drinking was less, right? What I started seeing is that my anxiety was going down because I wasn't putting myself into situations that I was having to make stupid decisions.
What did your anxiety look like? Slash look like? I mean, I still deal with anxiety. What does it look like for you?
Just being like hypertension, right? There's like hyper to every situation that you're in. You're always your head on a swivel. You're looking around. You don't trust things. You're backing against the corner, right? It's only within the last year, and this is 18 years post-combat, my friend, that I've figured out I can sit without my back to the door.
Wow.
Or with my back to the door, rather. I can sit with my back to the door, right? That's a real thing. People do that.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about, is Haji going to come in and suicide bomb the building?
Yeah.
Right? Now, there's other situations that are happening in America, but that's a whole other conversation. But, I think, those are the important things. And, so I get to this point where, I'm searching. I do the psilocybin, and then I have this experience with ayahuasca over 2 nights, and it was the most liberating thing for me. One, because I got to learn what I truly knew was, let it go, man. Just let the shit go. There's nothing that you can do about what's already happened to you. Let it go. Like, learn from it and let it go. And the second part of it is. Your ego, my ego, right? I don't lead with my ego. I lead with my heart, right? And that's where we all should be in life right now, is leading a little bit more with the heart rather than our own self-perceived interests that make our egos and that little thing in the back of your head that says, I want more, give me more, give me. Right? We're not feeding that person anymore, right? I'm feeding the person that says, hey, have you told somebody that you worked with or somebody that's close to you how much you care about them and what they mean to you?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I love that. And I will say, man, that is a hard thing to do.
It is.
So for the past 38 days, I've been doing the 38 challenge. So 400-meter run, 38 push-ups, 38 sit-ups, 38 squats. You do as many sets of that as you can in 38 minutes. And I've been doing that to prove a purpose, right? The purpose is because it sucks. It's really hard. Like, my body's beat, and every day that I go to the track, I don't want to do it. I get an uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, right? I don't want to do this. And it's the same thing with showing vulnerability, asking for help. So I also wanted to test my mind. I wanted to test this muscle of being vulnerable. So I wrote down 38 names, and the month's closing up, man. I've not missed a day of the workout. I got 10 days left. I have missed multiple people on that list.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not proud to say that, but I mean, my job now is just to share my experiences.
Yeah.
But
Well, newsflash, you're gonna fail.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's a visual representation and a real, real life application that this is not easy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do, and to call someone and to ask, to have that conversation, right? To put your heart first, like you're saying, that's vulnerability at its core, man.
Yeah, it really is. Because we live in a shitty world, man. Like, people bully each other left, right, and center. Like, people treat other people like garbage. Mm-hmm. Like, how many how many people we get to step over when you're walking to work?
Yeah, no,
happens every day.
Yeah, seriously.
Right. And it happened to me, and I'm here. I am checking myself. Right. I said to a guy when we're walking over here. He's like, "Hey man, can you help a man out?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't have anything. I don't have any cash." Man, I am regretting that I did not stop and talk to that guy.
Yeah, dude, happens to me
right?
all the time. Yeah,
and I talk about that shit. Right. But
right.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Not doing it.
Exactly.
And that's wrong.
Right. Yeah, and I think, but having that realization, like you said, you're gonna fail, and we're gonna fail. We can't. There's gonna be times where we don't put our hearts first,
mm-hmm.
right? But the fact that you could look back at it and reflect, that's change in your life. Because in the past, a lot of people look at that person's disgusting, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you don't know the you don't know why they're there. You don't know what they went through to
somebody's dad, somebody's wife, somebody's sister.
Yeah, exactly. So I love the point of leading with your heart. So looking at the timeline of when you did ayahuasca, when you started the Grunt Style Foundation, those things have anything to do together, or I guess the reason for becoming more passionate and involved with it?
I think what I've come to understand is that the universe speaks to us in several ways, and I've come to not question it. Right? I think the path that I've found myself on was meant to be. Right?
Absolutely.
I think I was meant to meet the executive director of the foundation. I believe that we were supposed to be on this path together. That led us to passing the PACT Act. That was a huge win for the veteran community. When we haven't seen anything like that since World War II.
Yeah.
Right. I think my experiences with plant medicine and this rebirth that I have is for a reason. Right. That. And it all leads into the foundation and this ability to impact and change people's lives. Right. And I think that I'm a better person because of the foundation.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, you've experienced a lot of trauma in your life and gone through some things that no one wishes that they'd gone through, but it turned you, because you turned it and you dealt it and faced it and showed vulnerability, sought help, did things, and were on that journey to conquer your ego.
Yeah. Now
you're at the point where you are now.
Right.
What are some other ways that you lead with your heart?
Man, like I've got a 5-year-old son. That's probably here's a pull to be vulnerable again. We're all busy, right? I'm a 44-year-old man. I'm an executive of extremely large business. My time is fleeting. It seems like in every circumstance that I have. And I look at my son when I come home from work, and he's like, Dad, can we play? Can we play? And every part of me wants to be like, no, I got work, I got to do this, I got to do that. But I sit down and I put myself in another person's shoe, right? Which I've hardly ever done before in my life, right? I put myself into that young little kid's head. Right, and I look, and I'm thinking of what I would look up to my father, and now I'm showing fucking empathy, right? Yeah. God damn it, are these feelings, right? Like, what are we doing here? But I think showing empathy now and understanding where other people are and where other people put their value of their emotions into things, right? And we got to respect that, right? Because perception is a hell of a thing, right? Like it's like cocaine. It's different for everybody. And you gotta respect where people are at and the experiences that they had in their life. When somebody's having a bad day at work, do you shit on them because they're having a bad day at work? Like, oh, well, Frank's fucking up again. Right? Yes, that's what everybody does, right? But who's the person that goes over and be like, hey, Frank, is everything all right? You everything good at home? Like, you're having an off day? Who's having that conversation? Well, I want to be that guy that's having that conversation.
Me too.
As a person,
yeah,
right? That says, I want to understand what's happening and make sure that you're being set up for success.
Absolutely, and that's a sign of vulnerability too. I think vulnerability is a two-way street, right? You have to ask for help when you need it, because, like, I didn't know what my brother was going through, right? Yeah. And in the moment, I didn't recognize those signs. Looking back at it now, I can start to point at things, and now I use the lessons that I learned in that situation to share what I learned so that other people can address it. But now, once you are armed with how to recognize something, like you said, someone's not performing at work, right? Or someone feels off, they're sleeping in, they're having mood swings. Instead of saying, hey, why are you being lazy? Why are you doing this? Why do you have this attitude? Ask them, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on at the core? And then that's how we get to the bottom of a lot of the issues what people are facing.
Yeah. Conversation. Right?
Yeah.
Interaction, network, just breaking down those barriers and, connecting with people. Right. That's we as a species, like, that's what it is.
Yeah. And
right?
Unfortunately, we've lived in a world these past couple of years where connection was stripped from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't help the issue at all.
It's insane. Right. We were living in some, strange days. Right, where it seems like we have to question everything that we see, right? Mm-hmm. But we can't forget about the things that are important to us, right? We can't forget about those relationships, and we can't, and most importantly, we can't forget to show up, right? That's the part of everything. Like taking that first step, right, is always the first thing. This is the hardest thing, taking the first step. But showing up, probably harder than taking the first step.
Yeah, right? That's a great point. That is a great point. And because what I always say, the 38 challenge, our purpose is not to create programs. Our purpose is to teach people how to take the first step,
mm-hmm.
to teach them that being vulnerable and asking for help is not weak, which has been taught for so long and been instilled into society, and especially in the military, but it instead is very strong. Yeah. So for you, what's the difference between showing up and taking the first step?
I think showing up is bringing 100% of yourself, right? Bringing being attentive, being the listener, right? There's most people like listen, right? But are they hearing what is really being talked about? Are they really sucking in the communication? Or are they just like, oh, yeah? Are they listening to respond, right? Rather than kind of just taking it all in. So I think showing up is bringing your best self to the situation, being supportive, being inclusive, being being a team member, right? Being part of the conversation.
And I think back to your definition of vulnerability. I think showing up is being aware.
Yeah.
And showing up is reflection, and showing up is the step before taking the first step.
It really is.
Because if you don't know what you're dealing with, and you don't address the problems that you're dealing with straight up, then you can't take that first step of picking up the phone and calling someone, or take that first step of asking someone, hey, are you okay?
Right.
So I think in this scenario, showing up is the part of being honest with yourself.
Yeah. It's like being on an airplane, right? You can't. The steward or the flight attendants say that put your mask on before you put the mask on of another person. Right? Mm-hmm. You can't help somebody else until you have helped yourself, right? And make sure that you are in the right space to be of value to somebody else, right? And that's where I think showing up is really about, is like, making sure that you're putting in yourself, investing in yourself so that you can be the best for others.
So as someone who has gone through trauma, and want to make this point, and I try to make it as much as possible, is your experiences of, seeing your best friend getting blown up, or, going through a hard childhood and all these different things. Like, no doubt you've had a difficult life. And what I always say is that, you don't need to go through what Tim's gone through, or you don't have to lose a brother to suicide, or you don't have to have all these super traumatic experiences for you to be dealing with the negative consequences of mental health. And I think that is a very important point to make. Mm-hmm. It's because someone who loses their dog, right, might be in the same exact point that you were at. So I always want to make that point. But as someone who has gone through as much as you have, and have the lessons that you've learned, and the trauma that you experience, and facing that ego, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who right now just needs to show up? How does someone show up? What advice would you give to someone to seek vulnerability?
Man, that is a great question. It could be something as very simple as, the way that you shake a person's hand, right? Showing up, it can just be as simple as embracing somebody, right? I've gotten to this kick right now that, well, it's not really a kick, but it's this weird thing that I laugh even thinking about it. But I'm now asking people, like, man, can I just embrace you? Like, I want to give people hugs for some reason.
Right.
Like, that's weird to me.
I'll give you a hug, man.
but there's like this part of me now feels that I need to be expressing that energy out towards people, right? That's me showing up. That's me being a part of a room, right? Is me putting my energy into the space that I'm filling, right? Because my idea is to be the best I can be, and be of value to whatever and wherever I am, right? And I think that to me, that's being it, is just being an energy of positivity, or being positive, and just pushing that energy out. That's I don't know if that's really the
No, I love it, and I think that again, vulnerability takes on so many different shapes and sizes. Like, it is emotion, right? It's love. Being vulnerable is putting, so you going up and hugging someone, not knowing how they're going to perceive that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's showing up. So how about as when you were in the spot that you were mentally to the point of almost of having suicidal ideations and being in that dark spot, what advice would you give to someone who's in that spot right now?
I'd say, it's not worth it. Right? You get one chance on this mud ball that travels around a burning piece of gas 365 times a year, right? We're here for a reason, and we may not know what that reason is, but we're put on this place for a reason, and everybody, to extinguish your flame early, you're doing no service to the world in which we're able to experience.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, I want to talk about the Grunt Style Foundation and how Grunt Style is leading with its heart through its foundation. So what are some things what do you want the purpose to be of the foundation, and what are some things you're excited about?
Yeah, I think the foundation is one of the newest iterations of Grunt Style and what we're doing. The company's been around since 2009. The foundation was born of April last year. Mm-hmm. Our mission is to provide services and resources to active duty service members and reservists and veterans and their families, and providing them opportunities to thrive, really. Right. So the way that we do that is through 4 different pillars: mental health and wellness, food insecurities, transition and sustainment, and veteran homelessness. veteran homelessness, you cannot really address that until you're swimming upstream and you're really tackling some of the issues that puts the veteran into the homeless situation. So how we do that is, through different things. Toxic exposure, right? It was a big thing we were working on for many, many years, and we've got this legislation passed into law, the PACT Act. But it doesn't change the fact that there are millions of individuals that have been exposed to some really horrific chemicals and cancerous influence. So we've created programs like our HBOT program, which puts hyperbaric chambers into veterans' hands that are suffering from toxic exposure-related illnesses. The beauty of this thing, as you I'm sure fully aware of, is the CTEs has brought this form of therapy back to the forefront of science, right? With specifics speaking to regeneration of gray brain matter, soft tissues, oxygen enriched red blood cells. Have extraordinary reception to soft tissue damage throughout the body. So these highly oxygenated and pressurized chambers do extraordinarily well for individuals with PTSD, with deep toxin damage that is housed in soft tissue. All of these things get pushed out through different protocols. We're seeing regeneration of brain function and synapses through TBI. Seeing PTSD symptoms, being reduced. So it has a great program. Our food insecurities program. This is something that I can't believe that we even have to have a program for this, but it exists, right? And many other organizations across the United States are involved in doing stuff like this very similarly. But a third of our active duty military, married with children, are on food stamps, right? So, you have, 18, 19, 20, 22-year-olds, maybe up to 25. These are generally up to E6, right? That, are out there wearing the uniform of our country, ready to defend it at any moment, but are struggling and fighting tooth and nail to put food on the table for their family. That's ridiculous to me.
That is ridiculous.
Right? So this year in 2022, the foundation has delivered more than 50 tons of food and household commodity. Well, food rather. That's not to include all the household commodities.
That's nuts.
Yeah, to active duty and reservists and veterans across the United States. And the idea is to put $500 back into the family finances, right? So, imagine if you're an E4 with, you're married and you have 2 children, right? $500 to you in the period of a month, that's a lot of money, right? That could go in paying a car note that you're behind on, maybe, paying, rent or, whatever the case may be. You're able to reinvest that money into your family and do something different with it. So we find that to be extraordinary. And then more doing events like Warrior Rising, partnering with great individuals that are focused in, taking the individuals from active duty and creating bridges for them as they come out into the civilian workplace, either getting involved with great businesses or standing up their own ideas. Right, that's very exciting to us as an organization and foundation, and we want to see more veterans, taking that challenge of saying, I'm going to build something of our own. Of my own, that I can put my name on.
That was awesome to see.
So that's what we're excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna do some cool stuff. I know with
I think so.
with Grunt Style and the 38 Challenge, teasing it a little bit, but I mean it goes right off the ethos of what we've been talking about this whole day, right?
Yeah.
And teaching, because what I love about Grunt Style, what I love about the thought of us partnering with the Grunt Style Foundation is that it's Grunt Style, right? Like when you think of Grunt Style, you think of these gritty shirts, right? That are so patriotic, right? And I mean, everyone who knows Grunt Style knows exactly what the brand's about. And then having like a conversation that we made today be a part of that, right? And showing people who are active duty, who are military, who are veterans, who are these badass people, right? That like to be proud about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I know we'll do some cool stuff in that aspect, but I wanted to touch on TBI,
Yes.
So let's talk TBI. What's your experience with traumatic brain injuries?
I suffer from it myself. You'll hear me talk frequently where I'll be on a rant and then I'll just totally lose an idea of where I was marching my conversation towards. That happens to me quite frequently. I was blown up 4 times and from IEDs in Iraq, and that fucked me up, man.
I can't imagine, and the fact that that's not, we had this conversation too, the fact that's not talked about, the fact that a lot of the military doesn't even know that a concussion is a form of TBI.
Yeah.
Like they think of TBI as not, obviously your circumstances were extreme, but getting blown up in an ID or a Humvee, that in the military is a lot of the times diagnosed as a concussion, an MTBI. Right. That's a lot different than that high level exposure is a lot different than what other concussions could look like. Sure. There's just no awareness there. Veterans don't, and active military doesn't understand is that, and I always find this correlation fascinating and also incredibly alarming. But as we know, unfortunately, the veteran suicide rate is 50% higher than a regular person and than a civilian. But after one concussion, your chance of suicide doubles. Mm-hmm. It's also 50% higher. A lot of people don't know that. So if you look at the correlation between sometimes the thoughts, the behaviors, the actions, the things that we've been talking about, people who have served and have experienced brain trauma, it doesn't need to be an IED, it doesn't need to be overhead blast. It could be from training, whatever it is. There's an injury to your brain a lot of times that is causing you to think a certain way or act a certain way, behave a certain way, and we need to spread the awareness on that. Yeah. On that as well.
Yeah. It comes down to I'm not a doctor, right? I'm just a guy.
Me neither. On the record, I'm not a doctor.
I'm just a guy that survived a couple of IEDs, right?
I'm just a guy that gets brains for my job.
And so for me, it's like these suicidal ideations. For when we're speaking specifically about TBI, my belief comes from like the loss of dissonance, right? The loss of your ability to cognitively think and use your neocortex in ways that it's supposed to be used to, rationalize, right? When you start, losing that ability to rationalize, then your brain will start doing what it will do, right? Because there's no checks and balances, and then you found yourself, so far down a path that you're looking at a gun, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and you talked about CTE. One of the number one side effects of chronic traumatic encephalopathy and traumatic brain injuries is impulsivity, and it takes 4 pounds of pressure to pull a trigger, and that is a decision you can't take back. So if a side effect of it is making impulse decisions, and like you said, now in my opinion, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I think a lot of the suicides are not premeditated. I don't think there's a lot of times I think there's ideation possibly, but it's not like I have a plan.
Right.
And due to the disease or the injury that you have, it is causing people to act in a certain way. And I think that we need to spread the message that there is an injury to your brain, and you are not, you're not nuts, right? You're not crazy. You're not dealing with these things alone. Like there's an injury, and like any injury of your body, it needs to be addressed. You need to talk about it. You need to go seek help so that we can repair it and so it can function like it's supposed to.
Yeah. Here's one of the things, science is data driven, right? I'm interested in knowing how many American forces were treated for IED related illnesses, or not necessarily IED related impacts that were ambulatory walking. Meaning that there was nothing there was no damage that taken them off the battlefield, right? And they got blown up, they survived, they're able to go back in.
Yeah.
I want to know those numbers, right? Yep. Because I want to take those numbers and see how many of those people have actually committed suicide in the last 20 years. Because I bet you the number is going to be resoundingly high and scary, because those are the individuals that have probably suffered the most in terms of the loss of dissonance and their ability to check their intrusive thoughts, right? Because of the CT and the damage done to their brains.
Absolutely. And two things: number of TBIs since the war on terror. The recent data is 414,000. Number of suicides is 114,000.
Yeah.
So again, look at the numbers. There's an increase of 84% of individuals taking their in the past couple of years. Individuals in the military taking their lives between the ages of 18 and 34. Again, on record, this is not proven science. This is just me looking at data and numbers. A lot of the time, stage 2 CTE is within that age gap.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also stage 2 CTE is a lot of when the behavioral changes happen, right? When someone does take their life a lot of the times. And it's not all, stage 2 CTE is not always between the ages of 18 and 34, but a lot of the times it is. And you're looking at the numbers of suicide increase in that age gap. It's also about the same age when people are developing these behavioral symptoms, which lead to suicide and lead to mental illness.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we need people to pledge their brains so that we can further the research, so that we can see how brain injuries are impacting our veterans. So I guess I'll leave with that question. I mean, are you interested in pledging your brain to Project Illness?
I'm not opposed to it. I think it is important for us to understand what combat does to the human body, right? And we have a lot of questions. We don't even have a scintilla of the answers.
No, we don't.
Right?
We really don't.
But I don't want to make a. I'll say this. Yes, I'm willing to give my brain to science.
Okay, we'll talk more about it afterwards. Yeah. But it's the thought behind we need to increase the research and the awareness, and that this is an opportunity for people that's important.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned, and there's going to be a lot of what I'm excited for us to work together in the future is things like you discussed, like psychedelics, which helped your life. You know, whatever it is out there that can help people now. Because what people need to understand, as I mentioned, there's an injury to your brain, but there's a difference between telling someone that there's an injury to their brain, and I will say that there is hope.
Yeah, and I want to make something very clear. Like, my path of enlightenment that I have found is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
For anybody that is listening out there, and you have your own interests of psychedelics and treatment there, do your research. Right. Mm-hmm. This is not your mama's
Someone hands you two pills.
Syrup.
Someone hands you 2 pills off an airplane. Don't take them. Yeah.
Don't do what I did. Yeah. Be more responsible. But seriously, like there's a lot of implications, that you need to be aware of. Like, if you're on SSRIs right now, you can't do this stuff. Like, you have to be off it. So, do your research.
Don't just go take. Yeah. Not telling anyone to go take psychedelics, but I am a proponent of whatever. Yes, absolutely. Do your research and do not go out and take psilocybin in the airport. Don't do that. I'm not saying you should do that. But what I am saying, and what we talked about earlier, is that show up for yourself. Show up and look internally and look in the mirror and face that ego that's holding you back and that's saying that's holding you from seeking help and from living a life of a heart-focused life, a life where your heart is leading first. And just take the first step, which is the hardest one to take, and then keep taking steps after that, because there is something out there that will help you. Yeah. There is something. I can promise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole idea of self-rescue, right? Nobody's coming to help, because as much as we want to think that people care about us, there's not a lot of people that care about other people, right? Mm-hmm. So it's we have to change that as a society. Yeah, that's extraordinarily important.
Well, and I also think it's there's people who care about you that have no idea what you're going through right now.
Yes,
and I think that if you do tell them, then you're gonna see that they're not gonna turn their shoulder on you. There's some people who would, but the people who love you. And even people who don't, the people who I don't like, if they come up to me and they said the same with you, and they said, "Hey man, I'm messed up," I'm dropping everything I do to help them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but like you said, there's no one coming to help you if they don't know that you need help.
Yeah. So, self-rescue, man. Like find it, search for it, understand what it is that you need and build resources around that.
Absolutely. Last question I'll ask you.
Said it.
What does the 38 challenge mean to Tim Jensen?
I think the 38 challenge to me means, I think there's a lot of things, right? I think that it means that there are individuals out there that care about and are willing to put everything on the line to understand something that is affecting a lot of people, right? And the effort that goes into putting those resources together to do that is, I see it as standing up my own foundation and understanding those difficulties. The passion behind that is really what enamors me. For somebody to stand up a foundation and a 501c3, there's a lot of passion. There's something that's driving that.
Yeah.
And it's generally a story, and it's generally something rooted in trauma that has greatly affected an individual, right? And generally those individuals will be on a path for the rest of their life to right a wrong or bring an injustice to justice, whatever the case may be. So I think that's one aspect. I think the other aspect is it's important that this idea exists, and this focus is being put on CTE, right? Because this affects everybody, right? It affects your children playing little league football, right? Or any academic sport, or intramural sport.
Which is a whole nother conversation
right?
in itself, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To combat and the people serving our country, right? So imagine the spectrum that's in between that's happening there, and bringing that awareness to the forefront is really big, right? We've seen some of the biggest personalities suffer from this. Jim McMahon, right? Man, I grew up watching that guy.
Yeah.
He was a huge icon of mine, and you see where he is mentally these days, and that's a struggle, right? We need to know what is like. We need to know more about that. And the human body is an incredible thing. If we can find ways of repairing that, like, my gosh, that's what the science is all about,
dude. Yeah, and that's why there is hope, and we will find a way to diagnose it in living people and to treat it. We will, it just like anything. And that's why I love this time to talk TBI. It's because a lot of the times the only way to see it right now is if you talk about your experiences and talk about the things that you've been through. And if eating this cactus helps save my brother's life or save the people who you lost, it's like, eat the cactus then. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
Like
one spoon at a time.
Yeah, little or the whole damn thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah. So, man, what an incredible episode. Thank you for the person who you are. Thank you for being a heart first leader. And thank you for being vulnerable, man.
Oh, I thank you for all that you do, my friend. Like, these are big topics. These are big conversations that you're having. And it's affecting a lot of people's lives, and that means a lot to me. Like to know that other people like give a shit, right? That's the path I'm on, is finding more people that give a shit and bringing them to closer and bigger networks.
I'm glad that we met, man. Excited to next time we'll be speaking together. We'll be, I'm sure, announcing some awesome things we're doing together as
look forward
foundation.
to it.
So, all right, appreciate you, brother.
Semper Fi.
Cool. Hell yeah, man.
That was good.
Appreciate you, brother.
Real, man.